Hey everyone. So, Valentine's Day is coming right around the corner. Faster than I expected. I certainly didn't keep track of time with law school and whatnot going on, and so I actually thought, today I have a little extra time. I got dressed up for a meeting I had earlier, so I figured, hey, might be a good time to talk about some Valentine's Day related things, right? Since that's what's sort of on people's minds. And so I figured today and Friday, I have other ideas for off in the future, commentary things, but I kind of want to talk about my experiences in Valentine's Day related subjects. And so today, what I want to talk about are my experiences dating as a trans woman, right? So this is going to be real fun. Got some coffee. Because God, it's been a long day, and I really need the caffeine. So, bear with me, fam. I'm sorry if you can hear that outside. I can. So, if you've watched my content before in videos, which God, I mean, I'm glad that I'm improving the quality of my videos every time I record. But yeah, if you've watched my videos from before, where the quality isn't so great, sorry. You know a little bit about my history with, with the first really serious relationship in my life, right? That was a relationship I was in for about 2.5 years, engaged for 1.5 of those years, and I am not currently married, so there's a reasonable guess. You can probably reasonably guess how that ended. You can go watch the video on that, and if you want to catch up on that story. So I'm not going to be talking about that today. What I'm going to be talking about are my experiences dating sort of after that, after I started transition, what it looked like as I was going through transition, and what it looks like nowadays, right? Because it's definitely been a journey. I've been with a lot of very different people, and I'm not trying to like trash on anyone I've been with. For the most part, I feel like I've had a lot of very good and meaningful experiences in my relationships. Right. I'm only going to be talking about things, to the extent that it's just what happened, and I'm not trying to paint it, any kind of either like overtly positive or negative way. I just, want to be able to tell you what it is and how it's affected my life. So after that serious relationship ended, I was single for a while, right? Admittedly, and this was during sort of the first, during a decent majority of the first year of HRT for me, right? I was at a point where I was extremely self-conscious about my body. I mean, I'm still self-conscious about my body, but now that I'm getting to a point where I can like look in the mirror and be like, oh my God, I actually like my reflection. That's, changing more and more over time. But for a long time, I was extremely self-conscious about my body, and I didn't feel comfortable sharing it with anyone. And so for like, I think the first, and especially, because I was, in the middle of a serious fallout from a relationship, I was not in any place to date anyone for about the first, 6 to 7 months after I started on HRT. That was in April 4th of 2018, for reference. And so really it wasn't until a lot later in the year, when I had moved to Little Rock, Arkansas, right? This is a weird sort of part of the story because I'm not sure if what I'm about to describe was a relationship or not. Like, it's funny because I'm still very close with this person I'm about to describe, and we talk all the time, and we always discuss like what was the nature of this, and we don't really know, but it was certainly more in the friendship. So when I was living in Little Rock, Arkansas, I had been brought there because I had been forced to move out there. I'm not sure if I've gone into the reasons why. I think I intended to make that another video, but they aren't relevant here. I was living in Little Rock, Arkansas with a friend of mine who I knew from my hometown in Ohio and who was serving in the Air Force. And he's a super cool guy. He actually just recently got married. Good for him. And there was a period in my life where I was very vulnerable, and I needed a place to stay, and he was more than willing to take me in for a little bit and help me get back off my feet, or back onto my feet rather. And so I was living with him for about probably around 2.5 months, somewhere in that sort of range. And that was really good, right? Like, I was able to get a lot of good work done. I think during that time, like, worked on where I was going to law school, did trips, and, like, built some income and all that. It was a really nice situation. It was also kind of lonely, right? It was great to have him there. He was an awesome person, but he and his now wife was living it. So it was 3 of us in an apartment. Like, I had my own room, and it was great. But they sort of did their own thing, and I did my own thing, and I was in the middle of transition, and they knew what I was about. They knew what I was about, and so we did stuff together. But I wasn't able to be around, like, I didn't have anyone who I could really talk about what I was going through, right? Because I was going through a lot of change in my body that I wanted to just, like, scream from the rooftops, right? I wanted to share this experience with someone, but I couldn't. And so what ended up happening was I actually went on to, I can't remember which subreddit, I think it was like r/transadoption. And I was originally just looking for a friend in the area who I could connect with and who I could, sort of relate to the things I was going through. And so I put out like a statement or like a post or whatever. I was like, hey, here's who I am, new to the area, would like friends, all that, like very basic, very simple. And a couple people responded. But one person responded in particular, and her name is Faith. And it was almost crazy, because the first day that we were talking, like over the course of like our first interactions, it was scary how much we had in common, right? Like, we had very similar like educational backgrounds, we had very similar interests, we had very similar hobbies, we had very similar views on the world. Like, we just went on and on and on, like hours of, like, it became a meme between us, right? Like, it became an inside joke that we had so much in common that it was like scary. Eventually we met up, and the first time we met up, she's really into basketball. Mind you, we also were at very similar stages in transition. And so we were both still, like somewhere around the 6 month mark, 6th to 7th month mark. And so, like, HRT had done a decent bit, but we were both still guy presenting. Now, mind you, I have like the way that it ended up working dynamically between us, it was interesting because, I'm a very outgoing person. I'm a very optimistic person. I'm very, glass is always half full and then some sort of a person. And so, and she's not, like, she's more an introvert. Not as much nowadays, but I still talk to her about that. But, like, at the time, she was very much an introvert. And so the first time we met up at a public basketball place. And that was because she's really big into basketball. Like, it would turn out that that's like one of her main hobbies, like her favorite thing to do to study, like she's the kind of person who knows like the name of like every single major basketball player in the NBA, right? Like she's that sort of person. And I'm not, but hey, it was really cool to be able to experience that with her. And so the first time we met up, it was at this public basketball place, and we ended up hanging out that day for like 12 straight hours. We played basketball there for a while, then we ended up going to Subway, and then she was like, hey, do you want to come over and just hang out? And I was like, absolutely. And I went back to her place, and I can't remember what time I left. It was a crazy, crazy late night. Um, did I stay over? I don't think I stayed over. Um, but yeah, and what ended up happening was that we ended up hanging out like every single day after my work and after her work for like an entire month, of just giving each other company. It was a really nice experience for me, and it was one of the things I cherish the most because she hadn't really before that been able to experience, what physical affection was, right? Like she was very, she didn't have a great history with other people. She had a friend who she was very close to over the internet, and eventually that person would go on to become who is today her girlfriend, and they do well enough. They're both still together down in Arkansas. Um, but when we were together, like we never codified dating, but we actually had many conversations where we were like, are we dating? And then we'd be like, well, we sort of do like, it's like we do all the things of dating. We have the regular trappings of dating. Like we go on dates, we spend all of our time together, we share everything with each other. We eventually live together. Eventually I moved in with her, and I lived with her for about 3 months, right? And we got really close. Um, there eventually came to be some issues between the two of us, um, insofar as to say that, A, and again, like, this is nothing that I hold against her in the slightest, right? Eventually, her best friend, who I mentioned earlier, um, she moved down to Arkansas and moved in with us. And very soon after she did, this was the first time they'd been together in such close proximity ever after knowing each other for like 5 years. And eventually they just codified a relationship. And I was really happy for them. It did hurt a little bit. Um, but I was happy for them, right? And I was happy because, Abby, one of the things that was really nice about us, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but, Faith hadn't really been treated affectionately before that. And so, I was able to sort of affirm her in the way that all trans girls want to. And I did it like relentlessly. And, she loved that. And, it was wonderful being able to see someone who was scared of touching someone, not even in a sexual way, just like period, like scared of being held and making yourself vulnerable enough to be in that sort of a space with another human being. It meant the world to me that I could share that experience with her, to show her that, you can trust another person to care about you genuinely. So yeah, it was, I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad that today, like, this is one of the greatest things, like, and this is just something about being trans or being gay or whatever, right? Like, one of the things I love about it is that, like, we're still really good friends. Like, I'll talk to her probably about once a week or so. I tried my best to keep up with my friends, as I'm able to. But, yeah, that was something I really enjoyed. There are other problems involved with that, but those are more private. Those are between the two of us, right? Another issue that sort of, well, you know, those are personal. I'll leave those. Uh, so yeah, after that, for a little while, I oh, it was probably. I'm sorry. I'm also just kind of remembering this as I go. Like I have the timeline in my head. So after I moved out of there, I went down to Florida, and I lived with my grandparents down there for about 2 to 3 months, which was great. It was one of the best times of my life. I got to be around my grandparents. I was out, and that was actually just when I started socially transitioning. I just started passing consistently when I had moved down there, or very shortly thereafter. And I was very romantically available, I'll tell you that much. But what I did was I ended up starting to date on. Um, I think I looked for people on Reddit. Um, I think I made like a basic post to like one of the trans subreddits. I was just like, God, it was so simple and basic. It was just like, hey, listen, if anyone's looking for like a trans gamer GF, like, hey, hit me up, fam. And and like I put like a meme on it, and it was funny, and it got like a lot of upvotes, but like some people actually responded, and I talked to a couple of them, and I ended up talking to this person who at the time was named Caitlin, right? I say at the time, more on that later. And that was a really good experience, right? You know, we had a lot of similar interests. We both were, at the time, trans femme. We basically, what we did was we had like a date night every night over the internet where we would watch, you know, like we would sync up like television shows, like different animes or things on Netflix or whatever, and we would have that play at the same time so we could like react to them together. Um, she was really big, or they were really big into League. Um, I'm sorry about that. It's hard to. It's. I'll explain in a second, but we would play League a lot because that is something that they were really into, um, and you know, I had no idea what I was doing. Right, I play Elder Scrolls Online. That is my child. um, but yeah, we had a lot of really nice fun. I even got to visit them at one point when I was traveling through. They lived in Alabama. Um, I got to visit them one time, and actually it was funny because when I was visiting them, I actually like literally as soon as I drove into town got a stomach virus, and like they basically just like we met up and they just like drove me around everywhere, and I was just like dying in the side seat, and they'd be like, "Hey, are you all right?" And I'd be like, "Yes, I'm fine." Like, trust me, I appreciate you. Thank you for showing me around your hometown. Um, it was really nice, right? Um, that went on for a couple months, um, until eventually I moved back to Ohio, and we were still dating, right? We'd sort of codified it, and listen, if you're watching this, I don't mean anything bad against you. Like I'm fine with it, right? So audience, what basically happened was they sent me a text one day. I knew like you know when someone doesn't talk to you as much as they normally do, and like you know something is wrong, but like you're afraid to ask because they know like then you have to deal with whatever it is wrong with them, right? So that's basically what happened. They weren't responding as much, and eventually I was like, "Hey, is everything all right?" And they sent me a text with effectively three parts to it. Um, the first was that they had done a lot of self reflecting and they realized that they identified more as non binary, which, you know, and as I'm reading through, I read that first and I was like, all right, cool. First time I had been with a non binary person, but, you know, like, as far like I'm still figuring out my sexuality, right? Like it's still out there, but like I've been with all different sorts of people, so I was just like, you know, I reflected on it for a moment, and I was like, all right, you know, like I was fine with it. Um, And so, yeah, I was reading that. I was like, all right, cool. The second part said, I've also been thinking a lot, and I want to make sure to stay in Alabama for the foreseeable future. Originally, the idea was that, they really wanted to get out of Alabama, like, because it's Alabama, right? But, yeah, they were really looking to get out of there, so it really, sort of worked out for the future, and we had, like, this plan where we would be able to live together on the East Coast or somewhere similar in the future, right? And so I saw that, and I was like, all right, well, this is definitely different. Well, it's not necessarily a deal breaker, right? Like if like they were important enough to me that we could make it work. Um, but then I got to the last part of it, and they also said they realized that they were a femme. I can't remember the exact term, but basically they said that they were attracted to more feminine people. Um, in that they weren't as attracted to me because of that. Which was like, listen, you could have just not said that, right? Like, you could have just not. Because it kind of hurt, right? But I took it in good stride, and I just went home and I cried for a bit, and the irony is that when I was actually when I was with Faith, there was actually some friction. I alluded earlier that there was a little bit of friction. There's actually some friction there where there's a lot of issues of me being too feminine when I was with her. She prefers a more masculine partner, and so I was like, fuck. One partner thinks I'm too masculine, the other thinks I'm too feminine. I can't win. Right? So after that, I don't know, I was in a rough spot um, for a little while, and really I wasn't planning on dating anyone for the foreseeable future, right? I just kind of focused on myself, getting ready for law school at this point, getting my future sort of underway. And then, by pure chance, the couple months before I go off to law school, I'm in my hometown, right? And I'm connecting with some people right before I head out. And I also formally come out, right? Because before that point, I had not come out to, like, I'd been out to a decent amount of people, especially like family and close friends, but not the full town. And I've been kind of worried about that because my town is from, a conservative part of Ohio, right? And so I did not know how people would react. And I mentioned this before, but it actually went super well. I don't think I got one negative response. Like, I made a post on Facebook. I don't think I got one negative response on Facebook, right? And a lot of people showed like came out and showed like crazy amounts of overt support, which made me feel a lot better about the state of the state of humanity in America. But more than that, something that was equally as interesting was that someone reached out. Weirdly enough, the mom of someone who I used to play football with. This was an interesting development, and reached out to me and said, hey, like, she had known me, so she just referred me to my Riley. She was like, hey, Riley, I'm super supportive, 100% there for you. I'm not sure if you're aware, but I also have, I have a daughter who's, like, just a year or two younger than you who is also trans. And, you both are here in Huron at the moment. Like, you should totally meet up if you want to. And originally, originally I was just kind of like, all right, well, she's just, like, it's kind of weird that she's just like, hey, you're a trans person, you're obviously going to like this other trans person. And I understand there's problems with that, but, I was very flattered, and I was like, sure, So I had her send me, her daughter's name is Cassie. I had her send me Cassie's cell phone number, and we ended up meeting up at Panera for coffee. If you're wondering why it wasn't at Starbucks, it's because at the time that's when the whole Starbucks litigation was happening with the employee that was trans who was discriminated against by the manager, and they went through a whole bit of litigation over that. That's when that was happening. So we specifically went out of our way to avoid Starbucks. We went to Panera, and we were just supposed to talk for like probably an hour and just like catch up and be like, hey, how are you? We ended up talking for like 4 hours at that Panera, like long after our coffee had been gone. And afterwards, like, you know, that sort of feeling where you're talking to someone and you're just kind of like, oh yeah, I'm very gay for this person. And eventually I just asked her like, hey, do you want to head back to my place after this? And she was just like, yeah. And it just kind of went from there. We ended up hanging out like every day after that, and it was actually just like super chill, right? Like I can definitively say like this was probably one of the funnest relationships I'd ever been in, because you know, this is someone, like, it wasn't like anything was super planned out, and it's not like we, you know, like we were very close, like we were really good friends. But we just kind of went with it, right? We didn't overthink it. We didn't like overcomplicate things. We were just kind of like, hey, we're both here. We're both, you know, enjoying each other's company, and you know, we're super into each other. So we were like, all right. and yeah, so we were together for pretty much the whole summer. After I left for law school, we both pretty quickly realized that like, hey, we had a lot of fun when we were like together in person. Distance is probably not going to be as great, so we just kind of decided to end it. And yeah, and that's basically all that story. Like, it was just like a super mature, clean, awesome relationship. And I'm pretty sure that Cassie is like, I saw a picture on Facebook somewhere. She just recently graduated from undergrad, like finished her like outer degree. Awesome, good for her. I think she's dating someone else. I think she's dating another girl. I've seen pictures of her with another girl. I'm just like, damn, good for you. And yeah, that pretty much brings us up to today, because ever since I've started law school, I haven't really been in a relationship. Not for necessarily any lack of trying, but it's just been hard for a number of reasons. It's hard to date as a student because, you know, I just don't have as much time to devote to, you know, the long process of courting someone or talking to someone or vetting them or what have you, right? Because like, and this is me, I'm not trying to prescribe any, you know, practices or morals or whatever on the people. I'm not as big into hookup culture, you know. That's just a personal thing, right? If I'm with someone, if I'm doing something with someone, or if I'm having a date or whatever, like, you know, I have an eye for the long term, right? Like, I want to form a meaningful relationship with someone. And so it's I've definitely talked to some people, right? I mentioned the other day, or in another video, that I was currently talking to someone, and that's kind of on hold. Something hard that I've sort of realized about myself, as I've been talking to people, is that at the end of the day, like, I do need someone. Like, if I am dating someone, I'm just not sure if long distance works for me. And I know that for some people it works great, right? I'm in a Discord right now where I play ESO with, like, you know, a bunch of other trans women, and like a lot of them are in long distance relationships and they make it work. And to them, I say, hey, more power to you. It's just something which, for me, doesn't satisfy a basic need to be able to be physically affectionate with someone. That doesn't just mean sex, right? Like, I'm not just talking about sex. It's a part of it, but like, it's more just about like being able to hold someone, or being able to hug someone, or like, you know, like touch their arm when you want to like show them a small, you know, little thing of affection. And maybe, like, especially once things are more developed, being able to wake up and look over and see them there with you, and being able to know that you have someone who cares enough about you that they're willing and, they want to sleep with you, right? Like, that's sort of what I look for in a person. Obviously, that isn't just it, but like, that's a pretty good indicator that things will work. And so that's sort of where I'm at. Uh, Mind you, I'm not really looking for people to give me some thirsty DMs. I ain't about it. Um, I'm talking to a couple people right now, and we'll see where things go. But dating at the moment is a very complicated thing for me because I have to make sure that I'm with someone who we connect with on an emotional level, someone who I am attracted to, which usually isn't the hardest thing to satisfy, right? Like, I don't know. I'm pretty sure, like, I'm about 99% sure that I'm pan, so, like, if we connect on, like, an emotional level, then, like, yeah. Um, and, but, like, balancing that time with law school and just, like, the amount of effort I have to go through. I haven't talked about this, but, like, as a trans woman, like, I have to go through so much more effort to vet someone, to make sure that they are someone who is safe and sees me like as a woman, and also, like, doesn't try to fetishize me or what have you, right? It's a problem because if I go to, like, I really can't go to, like, a bar and hook up with people because I'm scared that they're gonna fucking, freak out when they find out that I'm trans. And I, have a lot of trouble dating online because I have to worry that chasers are gonna fucking try and track me down, and that's really the only people I'd be able to find on there, right? It's a hard situation to be in, and it just makes it a lot more time consuming, and that's time that I really don't have. What I would advise for people who are trans who are dating, first and foremost, be safe. Um, it's just so happened, if I want to draw any inferences from sort of my history of dating after coming out, it's been mostly trans and queer people, right? Or not mostly, entirely. I mean, like, I've talked to, like, cis people over dating, and, like, like, I've explored that, and, like, it's certainly something, like, I'm interested in. But for me, because, being, like, being able to connect with someone emotionally and mentally are the things that I cherish most, I feel like it just sort of has happened naturally that I've ended up with more trans people. When you're with someone who's trans, there's already sort of a shared vocabulary between the two of you, even if it's someone who's, like, a trans guy, right? Because at least that, like, at minimum, you have someone who understands fundamentally what it's like to live part of your life being treated as something that you're not, and doing whatever you need to get to a point where you're able to be happy with yourself and how other people around you treat you, right? It's a special kind of experience that not a lot of people in society can understand at a fundamental level. And it's hard because it means that whenever I date whenever I start talking to someone who doesn't have that experience, I basically have to, like, lecture them, and or not lecture them. I don't want to make it sound like I'm talking, but, like, I have to, like, teach them some vocabulary, and that can be a little, awkward depending on, like, the subject matter, and it can be, like, very intimidating because there's a good chance that you say something that they're just like, whoa, 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 and it's hard. Does that mean that I will date exclusively, like, trans and queer people in the future? I don't know. I see it as very possible. Like, I've met a couple people who are cis, who are like super like awesome and knowledgeable allies, and who seem like they have great personalities. And honestly, like, it could work. I just feel like the probabilities, probably aren't as great because it takes a lot for a cis person to, go out of their way to learn what it's like for a trans person, right? To the best of their abilities. Like, it takes a lot on their part. And unfortunately, that's a lot more than we can ask of a lot of people in society. But hey, maybe someday we'll see some education reform, and we'll be able to have a much more shared vocabulary across all of society. A girl can dream. But yeah, that's kind of. I'll leave it there for right now. I think that pretty much covers it. But yeah, thank you for listening to my talk. If you have a date for Valentine's Day, cherish that opportunity. Make sure to be safe, bring protection, and, you know, have fun, right? But be safe, but have fun. Yeah. I don't know. Y'all know your lives better than I do, so enjoy yourselves. All right. I will talk to you later. I'm going to go work out and probably work on property and a legal writing memo or a legal research project. That's what I have to do. So I'm going to go do that. Peace, fam.